Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Unstoppable Dad Project. Appreciate you joining me here on this podcast for another week. Before I get into today's topic, please make sure that you're subscribed on whatever podcast platform that you are listening to this on. While you're there, if you're able to jump on and leave us a 5-star review, you will be helping the podcast climb those rankings and get out to hopefully more people that find some value out of what it is that I'm doing here. Also, very last favor, please make sure that you're sharing it around with anybody who you think might get some value out of the information that I am putting out here. By you doing all that for me, it helps me continue to grow the podcast and hopefully get some valuable information out to those who would like to hear it and are able to use it, and they're able to use it to help elicit some form of change, positive change that they are looking to implement for themselves. Now, this week, I wanted to have a chat about coaching, and specifically when it comes to coaching, why I believe that everybody needs their own individual plan. And the reason I wanted to talk about that, and it's a topic that I have covered off in some way, shape, or form on the podcast before. But at the moment, at the time of recording this, I'm recording this in July of 2023. And in July, on my Facebook memories, I get a lot of great coaching memories for myself. In July, in the past, I've been lucky enough to be part of two World Cup campaigns for the Australian gridiron team. And both those times I've been part of it as a positional coach. So when we went to China 7 years ago, I was the defensive backs coach. When we went to Mexico 5 years ago, I was the linebackers coach, and also as a strength and conditioning coach. And when it comes to coaching a sporting team, specifically a sport like American football, you can't give everybody the same program. So if we're talking from a strength and conditioning point of view, if you were to give every single person the same program, you are not going to be maximizing the time that they're able to use in their training. And not only that, from a coaching point of view, from a positional coaching point of view, you can't have the same, you can't give the whole team exactly the same coaching in the team training. So if we're talking about the field training and the sports specific training that we do with them, we simply can't. Why? Because the application of that training for each individual on the field is going to be different. Now, when I say each individual, positional groups are generally going to have the same or very similar training programs, from a strength and conditioning point of view, and then from a sports specific point of view. But if we were to provide, say, an offensive lineman with the same program as what a defensive back is getting, that is going to cause some issues in what is going to happen in the game. Why? Because they are doing two completely different positions. And the application of what they need to do on the field is completely different. A defensive back is going to need a lot more speed work. They are going to need to work on lateral movement. They're going to need to work on sprinting. They're going to need to work on change of direction. Now, there are going to be things within those topics that I've covered off that an offensive lineman would need, but in a game, they don't have to cover anywhere as much ground as what a defensive back is. But what they do have to do is they are getting involved in more hand-to-hand combat with the person in front of them on the field than what a defensive back is. Does a defensive back need to know how to do things, how to shed a block, how to get hands on somebody if they need to hold them up? Yes, they do, but the level at which they need to do that is completely different to that of an offensive lineman. And then if you build that out over the whole team, the quarterback's going to be different. The wide receivers are going to be different. Running backs are going to be different. Linebackers are everybody requires their own individualized coaching and their own individualized program, because at the end of the day, the individual application of that training and of that coaching is different for each and every single one of them. And that translates across to life in general. And something that I try and get across to a lot of people when it comes to specifically training for overall health and well-being. Yes, there are going to be a lot of similarities between good programs from one person to another, but the application of what that person needs to achieve is going to be different. And you'll see out there, you'll see a lot of programs that'll be designed for, say, dads, right? But each dad is going to have a different application for their training. Say, for example, a dad who wants to surf more. Their training program, while there's going to be similarities to, say, a dad like myself who wants to do jujitsu, it's going to be there's going to be differences in the application that we're going to need. I'm taking part in a contact sport that the person who wants to do more surfing is not. So therefore, there are going to be elements within our training program that are going to be different. And then from there, you can add on to that injury history, training history, all these things that I've kind of been beating the drum about on this podcast. And as a coach for the last 15 years, those things are going to matter as well. And that really still comes down to the application. Like the application, if you have a long injury history, or you're trying to get over an injury, that's your initial application. My initial application is to move better, so that then the secondary application of that is to do more of what I want, whether it could be go back and play a recreational sport, do some jiu-jitsu, do some surfing, go back and play touch footy with the boys or flag football on a Wednesday down at the local rugby club, or whatever the case might be. That's the initial application. And because those applications are going to be different for everybody, the plan and the coaching that needs to happen has to be unique to that person. And where a lot of cookie cutter programs will fall down for a lot of people is they don't take the application in mind. What they take into mind is the overarching goal. The overarching goal of trying to train more, trying to move better, trying to be healthier when it comes to, say, dads or parents that are looking to a training program. That is the overarching goal, to live longer, to keep playing this game of life for as long as we can. Now, if we relate that back to sport and a sport like gridiron, what's the overarching goal? Well, the overarching goal in that sense is to win. It's to win the sport. Yes, we can get into a debate, or we can get into a conversation about trying your hardest and, showing up and things like that. But I believe when it comes to sport, we play to win. And I think that if you go into a competitive arena, especially at the level that I was coaching in the scenarios that we were talking about when we were at the World Cup, we're at an international level. We're playing against sometimes semi-professional athletes that are like, we're there to win. And yes, there are going to be things that may not work in our favor to get us there. And yes, effort is, you want to make sure you put your best foot forward, and the effort should be, in my mind, when you're in that arena, you shouldn't have to ask somebody for effort. Effort should be given. I believe that in any element or aspect, effort should be assumed, but specifically in that arena, when you're competing at what may be the highest level, effort should be given. So we shouldn't be about trying our hardest and everything like that. We're trying to win. Right. If you think that's right or wrong, I don't know. But for me, that's what you're aiming towards when you step into an arena like that. And I think from a competition standpoint, if you want to compete, you should want to win. And there's nothing wrong with that. We shouldn't let society tell us that we shouldn't want to win just to help other people feel better about themselves. I think if you're going to step into a competitive environment, you should want to win. So that is the overarching goal for a team in that environment. The overarching goal is to win. So everyone, even though they have different on a team aspect or element, they have different individual plans. They are all working towards the same group goal, which is that of winning. We want to win the game. Now, if we relate that back to training, and why I think a lot of people get tripped up when they start to subscribe to group programs is they see this overarching goal that relates to them, but what's not being taken into account is the individual application at the time that they're needing to do the program. And for a lot of us as dads, as parents, the overarching goal of wanting to live longer, wanting to live a better quality of life, wanting to be able to be more physically present with our kids, and just to be able to do more and play the game of life for a lot longer at a higher level, that's the overarching goal for a lot of us. That is something that we are all working towards. And that is something that, for me personally, at the age of 40, that's something I'll be continuing to work towards more than likely for the next 20, 30, 40 years. If I get to another 40 years or another 50 years, the average life expectancy for most men is probably, 80s. I'm kind of at midlife right now, more than likely. 80s. If I get to 80, I think I'm going to be doing pretty well. But trying to work towards that overarching goal and having that always there is going to be something that I'm going to need to work towards. And if you're getting a group program written for that, that can be a successful thing for a lot of people, because we can either make the commitment to making it work for us in our current set of life circumstances. We want it bad enough that we'll shift stuff around and we'll start doing the work to get there. And that's amazing if you can do it. And if that works for you, great, keep doing it. But where it falls down for some people is they haven't taken into account what their specific application now is. And that specific application now for a lot of people is actually, while it's conducive with the overarching goal, it is different. So like for me, my specific application now with my training is to actually be able to keep doing jujitsu. Now, yes, the frequency at which I train is still going to be conducive with the overarching goal of being able to be more physically active for longer, be more physically present with my children. But I may not, I think I will probably always do jujitsu, but who knows what's going to happen in 10 years' time. I may not be doing jujitsu in 10 years' time. So the application of my training in that particular phase of my life or that season of my life may change. It may just change to, I just want to move well. And it may change to something that resembles my overarching goal a little bit more. But the application for a lot of people is going to be different to what that overarching goal is. And when it comes to large group training programs or cookie cutter training programs that are aligned with an overarching goal, but not taking into consideration the current application that you need from the training, that is where I have seen a lot of people who have come into my world and my life get tripped up, because it is like trying to fit a square peg in a round hole. They do it, and it's not that there's anything wrong with the program that they're doing. It's just, it's not conducive with what they need it to be conducive with right now for them right now at this phase of their life. So to tie all that back in, what's that mean for you? What's that mean for a dad who's got his own business, who's got a busy life, who maybe wants to go and play a sport, wants to get back some of that athleticism they had when they were younger so that they can be more active with their kids? Well, there's two things I think everybody needs to understand when it comes to their training. Number one is you need to understand that overarching goal, and it needs to be unique to you. It doesn't need to be something that you have pulled off social media that someone else has told you is important, because I think that is a very, very real thing for a lot of people. They listen to all this stuff and they consume all this information and they form their goal based off what they think it should be, which is brought together from the information that they have put together from just what they've heard. And they haven't actually taken the time to think about, is this important to me? And that needs to be a real conversation with yourself. No one else should tell you what your goal is. You need to know what your goal is. And that is probably the biggest piece of advice I can give to a lot of people, especially if you're feeling a little bit lost. You're feeling like you're a little bit rudderless at the moment with no direction. You need to sit down and have a real think about what's important to you and what your overarching goal is. And then from there, break it down to, and again, this doesn't have to be exactly the same right now. What is the current application that you want to use the training for, or you want to use the coaching for? And again, when it comes to looking at the goals and looking at what you want to do with this stuff and do with this training, I think you have to really think about, is this me that wants to do that? Or is this somebody else that wants to do that? Is this something I've listened to and I've gone, oh, that sounds pretty good. I want to go and do that, but it's not really important to me. Because if that's the case, I can tell you right now, one or two things is probably going to happen. Number one, you're not going to be able to do it. It's not going to be sustainable. You're just not going to stick to it because it's not actually important to you. It's just something you've heard that you think sounds good, and you start working towards that, and you just don't stick to it because it's not actually important to you, or it doesn't mean anything to you. It doesn't fit with your set of values and your current application that you're looking to do, or your overarching goal that you really want to do deep down. Or the second thing is, you can be somebody like me who is super stubborn, doesn't like to give up, and just does things because they need to be done. And you waste a lot of time, energy, and effort working towards something that just isn't important to you, that really isn't your goal, that you've just picked because you think it sounds good, because someone on social media told you that it should be what you should be working towards. And that is where we start to feel isolated. We start to feel alone, depressed. We start to feel anxious about things because what we're working towards is not actually conducive with our values. It doesn't align with where we want to work towards. So that's where I think it relates back to you, because if you can understand that and you can understand those two big things, what is my overarching goal when it comes to my health, when it comes to my well-being, when it comes to my family, when it comes to my finances, you can have different subcategories and have a different overarching goal for all of those subcategories, or you can just have one overarching theme for your life. So understanding that what's important to you is the first thing. The second thing is, what is the current application for the period I'm at in my life that I want out of this training? And once you understand those two things, and you can get all that aligned, doesn't mean that you don't have to do the work, or the work isn't hard. It generally means that we're able to stick to things better. We're able to be more consistent with what we need to, the actions we need to take and the things we need to do. And at the end of the day, consistent action is going to win over. But if we can take consistent action and more often than not enjoy the action that we're taking, we're going to be more inclined to stick to it long term. And we're going to be happier when we do stick to those things. And at the end of the day, I think that's what we need to understand when it comes to training. Like, it is about our health and happiness. And we're not competitive athletes that are looking to win every aspect or win the game. Winning the game for a lot of us is to keep playing the game. Keep playing the game of life, keep playing the game of fatherhood, keep playing the game of relationships that we're in, and maximizing the time in doing that and maximizing the enjoyment for ourselves and for the people we're around when we're doing those things. And unless we truly understand that, it's sometimes hard to take the action and consistently continue to take the action. So take some time. If you're struggling, take some time and have a think about what your overarching goal is. Yours, not somebody else's. And take some time and think about, what's the current application I want out of this? How do I want to apply the work that I'm going to do to XYZ activity, interaction, whatever the case might be. And then once you get those two things nailed down, then you can either start to build your own plan around it, or you can start to find a coach that is going to be able to help you move in that direction. Because to tie it all back into the football analogy, there is no point. I was lucky enough to coach defensive backs and linebackers. There are a lot of similarities between those two positions, but there's a lot of differences between those two positions. But for me, I've played those two positions, but I'm not going to be able to coach a defensive lineman. I could get away with it, but I'm not going to be as good as coaching a defensive lineman as somebody who has played and has really dove deep into coaching and playing that position. And it's the same vice versa. So once you know what you need to do with that, then finding somebody who's maybe able to guide you to those goals, who knows what they're doing, who has the track record of getting other people there, then the coaching relationship becomes much more effective. And the cost involved in that becomes less significant because you know you're going to be able to get to where you want to go. So if you do need help or you want to have a chat with me, you can book in a time below. Other than that, let me know what you thought about that. There are always going to be some similarities between sport and life, especially as it comes to training, and as it comes to, putting your best foot forward in order to get the most out of your life. So have a great week. Thanks again for listening. Like, share, subscribe, leave a 5-star review. Jump on, follow us on the socials at The Unstoppable Dad on Instagram, The Unstoppable Dad Project on Facebook, and I will see you all next week. Goodbye.